Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our first virtual press briefing. I'm here with Paul Mounds and Roland Cook. I'll introduce in a minute. Just to give you our briefing, first of all, in terms of where we are in the numbers. Another 1,200 people tested positive out of 3,400 tests. I think what makes that interesting or not is that really is a reflection on the number of tests we've had. 36% testing positive is slightly higher, but that's a number that goes up and down, and we'll talk about why that may not be the best indicator of what's going on. I think of real interest to me as I look at hospitalization. You see 79 people hospitalized. That's a number, again, that's going up not exponentially, but going up on a linear basis, which is, I think, good news. 17 fatalities is never good news, but again, it's a number that's not going up exponentially. And what that means is it gives us capacity to plan. And this is following what our modeling has been. And I start with our healthcare system. Our healthcare system is bending, but it's not breaking. And that's because we did built-in capacity in terms of everything we're trying to do. And that capacity, as I've described in terms of other, in other briefings, in terms of beds, in terms of people, in terms of ICU, we're planning accordingly for what we've got to do. And this linear allows us to plan even more. I'll tell you that the capacity is important in terms of a lot of our other functions that we're performing, as a state as well. We talked about nursing homes over the last couple days. Obviously, the infection rate in the nursing homes is high and continues to grow. The good news is we have several nursing homes, 1,000 beds. We're getting them online. We're going to have COVID-only nursing homes. And that means we're going to have COVID-free nursing homes. And that gives us a lot more confidence that we'll be able to contain the virus. And a Kirkland, Washington type situation is a little less likely to occur. Obviously, other group settings include the homeless. And again, they're folks living in close quarters where we got to be able to quarantine out those who have tested or contact somebody who is COVID positive and get them quarantined. And we've created about, I think it's 1,500 beds spread across 14 hotels, mainly double rooms. Again, so we can get the homeless taken care of in a safe and quarantine area and are much less likely to be able to disperse walking around a community. Roland Cook is our great commissioner on corrections. There's been a lot of talk about corrections, and I'll ask him to speak in a few minutes. But what's important to know there is, like with nursing homes and like with the homeless, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we have extra capacity in our nursing homes. Over the last couple of months, over 700 people have been released, low violent, lowest risk folks who were incarcerated are there for very minor probation-related issues. And on the other side of the equation, Roland is also looking at the oldest of our folks who are incarcerated, those who might be most likely to be at risk to a COVID infection. And again, seeing where they can be treated most safely. Is there a safe place outside of the correction facility where they can be taken care of? Or perhaps one of our negative pressure zones in the correction facility itself, which is quarantine, is the safest place. That's what our real priorities are. Moving to this next page, I want to talk a little bit about the demand curve and what you see in terms of the increase in folks who are infected in our state. And it's a little tough to see, but this was in the president's briefing over the last couple of days, and I had dozens of people say, I can't read it. Can you describe what's going on, especially as it impacts Connecticut? I think one thing you should know is that when New York City sneezes, Connecticut catches cold. And that's what happened in terms of the spread of the virus from New Rochelle. We talked about it, the pandemic in and around greater New York City. And you'll see going up further on. So I'll break this down county by county. But this chart gives you some very interesting things. You'll see the rate of increase in New York City, New York State, is a misnomer. It's really New York City going up, followed by New Jersey, followed by Louisiana. I think I mentioned they have a real pandemic in their New Orleans area, followed by Massachusetts is going up. Connecticut, our rate of increase is not going up quite as quickly, and there may be a variety of reasons for that, one of which is social distancing, another which may be we may be just a little less dense than downtown New Orleans and New York City. And that advantages our efforts at social distancing. The rest of the chart, you can see other states, all the way down to Vermont and Colorado and Illinois. But I think that gives you a little bit of sense that our social distancing may be having a positive impact. Next slide, please. Just for those of you like me who maybe had a hard time reading the an-hour print, we've broken this down a little bit more, just in terms of 5 states that are most impacted. And obviously, again, you can see New York and New Jersey. You can see Connecticut versus Washington State. That's interesting, where Washington State got into this, let's say, a couple weeks sooner than Connecticut. And it could be that they are flattening out. It could be they have really exceptional social distancing. It could be they got people into critical care faster. But there they've flattened out that curve in a way that Connecticut is attempting to flatten out that curve it's too early to say with success, but making progress. California, you see in the bottom there, they were early on. And they were early on in terms of social distancing, as was Connecticut. And so you can see they really have flattened out that curve in a meaningful way. So I think we have some information that indicates, to the degree to which you think testing in infections is a good barometer, which I can counter in a second, we are beginning to make some progress thanks to our social distancing effort. And because we're able to slowly flatten that curve, not going up quite as fast, again, it gives our hospitals, and not to mention corrections and nursing, a little more room to plan accordingly. This is important because we're on with Dr. Ambassador Birx today, who you've seen on the White House briefings, and we said it's misleading to talk about this pandemic in terms of states. Obviously, Southern Connecticut, you're 10 times more likely to be infected than you are in, New London counties. So you have to think about this in terms of regions. And to try to reinforce our case, we've got this issue here for you to look at, positive cases by county. Again, you can see Fairfield is leading the pack. You can see New Haven is accelerating as well. Hartford a little bit flatter. New London, Tolland, Litchfield, obviously a lot slower, in part because they're further from what was the heart of this in greater New York area. And we've had a little more time to plan and prepare there. Again, at one point, we thought that Fairfield and New Haven would be like a hockey stick. And right now, that's more linear. It's going up. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But because it's going up on a linear basis, that gives us a little more time to plan. This is a chart I want to spend a minute on because it's much more reflective of what's going on, and that's hospitalizations. A lot of people take a look at the infections, and you'll see they've bounced around a little bit, going up, going down. What does that mean? That often is a reflection of simply testing. Well, hospitalizations, whether we've tested only 5% of the folks or 20% of the people in, say, New Haven County, hospitalizations is a better indicator of what's going on in that greater community, what's going on in terms of community infection. Hospitalizations and sadly fatalities are graphs that I think are maybe a week to 2 weeks behind infections, but perhaps a better indicator of what's going on and a better indicator for us when it comes to modeling. And I think you can see here, it's a little confusing, the day-by-day change, but you'll see the day-by-day change is not going up day by day. The daily count line, that orange line, is going up, again, on a linear basis. I take this as reasonable good news. reasonable that situation could have been a lot more severe. We might not have been flattening out the curve, or at least making it more linear, and this gives us a lot more room to breathe. The next chart is sort of a reflection of what you had before. Again, in Fairfield County, you can see we had 41 additional hospitalizations. New Haven behind it, but only 12 more hospitalizations. So while their infection rate went up a lot, in part reflective of testing, their hospitalizations are going up modestly, again, which gives us time to plan. No new hospitalizations in New London. Is that one less in Wyndham? I mean, this is one of the things we are going to be working on for you over the next couple of days. I'm telling you all the new hospitalizations, but we're also going to show you discharges so you can see what the net increase or decrease is. You'll see in New York City over the last 4 or 5 days, the rate of the net increase in hospitalizations actually went down. They're building a little bit more capacity. And I think you're going to see a similar trend here, again, which gives us hope that when it comes to ventilators, when it comes to PPE, when it comes to ICU beds, when it comes to hospital beds, we are building ourselves some room. And that is what we always tried to do when we talked about flattening the curve. Again, the Dr. Burke's analysis, when you saw everything going on with infections, can be a little bit misleading. There's the denominator and there's the numerator. And I think it may mean in terms of our modeling that some of our worst case scenarios, that 20% of the people tested end up going to the hospital. He's found to be carrying a virus. Well, in fact, our hospitalization rates may be a lot lower than that because the number of people hospitalized is not based upon just the number of people we've tested, but it's based upon everybody that's infected out there. So, Josh and our DPH team are working carefully as we relook at these models all the time to see how fast we get to that apex, how fast we can flatten that curve, and what the gradual downslope on this will be. We were just on with the Vice President's task force, and he gave us some sobering reminders that when we talk about the next day, it may not be the next day, it may be the next year. And it may mean that there are a series of rolling pandemics over a period of time. So we're thinking very carefully about, as we maybe get to the backside of the increase in our infections, the increase in our hospitalizations over the next couple of months, how can we thoughtfully get people back to work without having another wave of infections? And a lot of that's going to be in and around more broad-based testing. You'll probably see from the first graph that while a lot of folks are saying our testing is down, we had 3,400 tests I showed you, came in yesterday. And I've told you about Semaphore, I've told you about Abbott Labs. Our testing is going to be going up dramatically. And what testing allows us to do is to see red, yellow, green, what it looks like in terms of infection and intensity in given areas, and where we might be able to get people back to work sooner. I am working with a number of folks, including our friend Ryan Drazowitz, in terms of antibody testing. And antibody testing, I'd like to think we'll be able to roll out in the none too distant future. What does antibody testing mean? That's a blood test. And that will tell us who was built up in immunity to the COVID virus, who maybe was infected, didn't know they were infected, who was of an age group and they have the immunity. They're the ones we can get back to work. They're the ones that are going to keep our manufacturing going. They're the ones we get back in terms of construction. They're the ones that we can get back into our workforce sooner. This is something we're going to do on a very thoughtful basis to make sure we don't have a second wave, as happened in the Spanish flu and other situations. And this is something I talked about with Dr. Fauci just a few days ago. We're trying to get insight from the federal government as well in terms of what we can do in terms of antibody testing and how we can accelerate so we know what people can do when. And before introducing Roland, I will say I'm cutting off here to go talk to Secretary Esper. He's our Secretary of Defense. And when it comes to our manufacturing base, they look to Connecticut. They look to Electric Boat. They look to Sikorsky. They look to Pratt. And Electric Boat has had, a half dozen infections there on their plant floor, as well as the CEO. So we work closely with Defense as well as others in the federal government. We tell Secretary Esper, look, when it comes to masks, when it comes to testing protocol, other ways, when it comes to fever thermometers, we need your help. You want us to prioritize these workers. We need you to help prioritize these folks so they can keep defending America on the front lines, but do it safely. With that, let me introduce to you Commissioner Cook. He's been a great friend. He's, taken over our real efforts at criminal justice reform in our corrections facilities. And right now, like a laser beam, he's focused on public health for all of our people, including those in our correctional facilities. Roland?
Thank you, Governor. Good morning, everyone. I'm Roland Cook. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Correction. I want to take just a minute to describe COVID-19 response efforts that are underway at all of the state's 14 correctional facilities. Immediately following Governor Lamont's declaration of public health emergency, the agency began implementing policy to protect our employees and the offender population we care for. These efforts include ongoing cleaning and disinfecting on all 3 shifts, basically constantly going on, modified operational plans at all facilities, suspension of all social visits, 14-day isolation policy for new intakes at all jails across the state, limiting non-essential inter-facility transfers, taking temperatures of all staff at each facility entrance, making masks available to all staff and the offender population. To minimize the impact of these necessary restrictions, we've also provided 2 free phone calls per week to the offender population and currently in discussions to expand those. We've suspended the copay obligations associated with medical services. We've enhanced the menu for the meal cycles. We've maintained laundry and commissary services. Simultaneous to these operational efforts, we've continued with discretionary releases, which include placing people in halfway houses and returning people to their homes with a sponsor under the supervision of an agency parole officer. Prior to any staff or offender COVID-19 cases, my direction was clear. Review all eligible and suitable low-risk offenders for release without circumventing routine protocols that support public safety as swiftly as possible, and add a layer of review that will prioritize offenders considered high risk per the CDC guidelines. In addition, we are collaborating with the judicial branch to analyze the pretrial population and sending information to the Board of Pardons and Parole for the review of candidates for compassionate and medical parole. I would not classify our efforts as a mass release. However, the early focused attention on releases is evident. As of this afternoon, our overall population count has dropped by 727 since the 1st of March, the onset of COVID-19. This is the largest one-month reduction in the state's history. To further express the ongoing release efforts, on 3/26/2020, the overall population count dipped below 12,000 for the first time in 27 years, last witnessed on 5/1 of 1993. Today's count is down to 11,713 and dropping. We have our entire reentry unit working on the complexities involved with leaving a prison during a pandemic to ensure that they have appropriate supports. We will not approve discretionary release for anyone under my statutory authority without a home plan. We understand the concerns COVID-19 creates for shelters. I'll close just by thanking the dedicated first responders, our health services personnel, our correctional officers, our support staff within the Department of Correction. I can't overstate their dedication throughout this challenging time. They're truly the unsung heroes of this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. We can take some questions here, and Paul Mounds, Chief of Staff, is here as well.
All right, I will call on reporters individually, and you can unmute yourself. I ask everyone else on the teleconference to remain muted. We'll start with Fox 61, question for the Governor, Commissioner Cook, or Chief of Staff Paul Mounds. Fox 61.
Hi, this is Zinnia Maldonado from Fox 61. We had a question in regards to the unemployment backlog. Last week, Governor you actually agree that there is a major backlog at the Department of Labor. Is there any guidance for the people of Connecticut worried about when they may receive assistance for unemployment?
Yeah, the guidance is the number of applications for unemployment compensation went up about 20 times compared to anything that's ever happened in a comparable period during a recession. 20 times. And Kirk Westby and his team at Department of Labor are focusing like a laser beam on this, but that's not good enough. We're throwing people at this. We're trying to do better to get that backlog down. And Kurt and his team are working on a technical fix that I hope we'll be able to announce in the next few days, so we'll be able to get those checks out in short order. I'm sorry you have to bear with us. As you know before, everything is retroactive, so nobody's, just because we're slower in getting those checks out to you, which you deserve, you are going to get the full amount that you're due.
Is there any guidance for people worried about when they may receive, any guidance for people who are exhibiting symptoms, but their doctors are telling them there's no need to be tested for COVID-19?
Right now, I would tell you, rely upon your doctor's best advice. And that's how it's been working. We are able to test more and more people. Our focus, our priorities are those who are there at the hospital. I told you we've been able to open up a number of beds, especially with the Abbott Lab 15-minute test. Our first responders are a real priority. Make sure they're safe going in and not infecting themselves or not infecting anybody else. And we're going to continue to widen that lens, but follow the dictates of your doctor. That's the best advice.
Next question will be from Matthew Campbell, Channel 3 WFSB.
Speaking about the tests, are the Abbott Lab tests here right now? We know that Rhode Islanders, they're rolling it out in conjunction with CVS. Where do we stand on those 15-minute tests?
I certainly know we're doing them down in Stamford Hospital. I think other hospitals, as far as I know. Josh is nodding. And we've had a good relationship. We talked to Abbott Labs senior executives at the end of last week. Connecticut's going to be a priority, and I think you're going to see a lot more of these 15-minute tests, as I alluded to previously.
In terms of the PPE and the hospital space, are we still staying ahead of this virus right now?
Hi, Matt. This is Paul Mounds. I'm going to answer a little bit off of the last question, then we'll get into the PPE question. So later this week, we should be expecting some additional Abbott Lab testing devices to come to Connecticut. As the governor stated, we have already received one down in Stamford that is operational. The governor did make a call to high executives at Abbott to make that a priority. But we are one of the few states that are going to be on the top of the list in terms of receiving Abbott Lab testing devices here in Connecticut. So we should see that arrive at DPH and then for distribution later this week.
And then where do we stand on the PPE and the hospital space right now? We know that, this is going to be a very trying week. How are we in maintaining the status quo right now?
We have a supply right now. We have a supply thanks to the aggressive efforts of our hospitals. They've been able to get enough to keep going for the near term. We have a very good accounting of where the PPE is, where the ventilators are, where they're needed. So our hospital system is working as one, as I suggested before, so we have to buy more time. We may be able to mix and match. And I will tell you that we were on the phone with the senior executives from the company that has the sterilization process and equipment for the PPE. It's been certified by the FDA. They're just beginning to release that now. And I have it on very good authority that Connecticut's going to be at the very top of that list for getting that equipment.
Next question will come from Kellen Lyons with the Connecticut Mirror.
Hello, this question is for Commissioner Cook. What's the point at which officials decide when to test an inmate? Is it when they're showing symptoms, or is it if they have underlying medical conditions or elderly? Do they have to show symptoms for a certain number of days?
I think I heard most of the question, Kellen. What we try to rely on mostly is the person's symptoms. Obviously, our medical staff are closely monitoring the different people that are showing those types of symptoms. Also, our staff and stuff are working closely with the inmates to watch those types of things. So typically, it has to do with what sort of symptoms that they're showing at the time.
Next question will be from Caitlin Krasselt of Hearst, Connecticut Media.
Hi. I have a couple of questions. First, how many of the death certificates say COVID-19 was the cause versus had COVID at the time of death? And then I'd also like to know if the governor has a comment on the protest that happened outside the residence this afternoon.
What was the first part of that question, Paul? Yeah.
Hi, Caitlin. On your first question, that would be best stated for the chief medical examiner, whose role is to make determination of death. As you know, as Dr. Carter explained on Friday, the DPH and part of their data takes into account individuals who have tested positive for COVID-19. And then for those who have passed away, they do put that on their data list that an individual passed away who also had COVID-19. But in terms of death certificates, that question should be best stated for the Office of Chief Medical Examiner. And then your second question, again, please.
Second question were the protesters out in front of the governor's residence, I think, involving our efforts with the corrections and the prisoners. My answer to that is give me a call. Let's talk about it. We don't need people outside protesting right now. I'm trying to keep groups less than 5. We got a public health emergency. But if you want to talk about it, you got my number.
And for Commissioner Cook, do you know of the more than 700 released, how many of those were released early?
How many of them were released early? I don't know the exact amount, but what I would tell you is that each one of these folks are screened and are already pre-approved to be released to the community. So exactly how many, I don't know that number.
Okay.
Next question will come from Lisa Backus of Connecticut News Junkie. We'll next go to Patrick Scahill of Connecticut Public Radio. WTIC News Radio. Audio isn't coming through for some reason. We got through plenty.
Looks like maybe there are not any questions right now, or at least we're having a hard time getting them. Let me just conclude with this. I'm sitting here looking at 10 empty seats, a couple of folks doing media wearing the masks, and you know, we are going to be getting back to normal. This is sort of jarring for me as well, and you know, miss seeing you guys. Learn how to use Zoom. I'd like to see you on the screen too. And just urge each and every person watching, you know, remember your local media. Remember that online news. I mean, there's a little less advertising for some of those folks, and they could use a hand as well. Max, you're signaling. We ready to go?
Yeah, let's see if we could try this again. For some reason, some of the audio wasn't coming through. Lisa Backus from CT News Junkie, you want to try asking a question? You may need to leave the Teams meeting and re-enter the meeting if your audio isn't working. Try one more. Alex Putterman from Hartford Current, maybe yours will work?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, Alex.
Great. Hey, Governor, you've talked a lot about the 50 ventilators that you were expecting to receive. Have those been received, and where does the ventilator supply stand right now?
The 50 ventilators have been received. And most of those were circulated downstate, where they have the greatest need right now. I think the don't tell this to the White House, but we're doing the very best we can to maximize our ventilators so we still have some capacity so nobody's at risk right now.
And then we've gotten a lot of response to your guys' model from last week. It looks like it showed that as of today, you would need 4,000, 5,000 hospital beds, which is a lot different from the numbers you're releasing of people who are actually hospitalized. And even if you consider people who are hospitalized but haven't tested positive yet, it still wouldn't seem to account for that very large amount. So I'm just wondering how that kind of works and how you reconcile what the model is showing should be the situation according to the projections with what is actually the situation on the ground.
I can tell you that we're greatly expanding the number of beds we have. Hospital beds, intermediate care beds, ICU beds. They're up almost double over the last month, and I'd like to think, as Josh said, we could get up to 12,000 as needed, depending on where the peak of this apex looks right now. We try and refine the modeling every day. We look at what's going on in New York. We see things flattening out a little bit in Louisiana. We see the trends coming up from Fairfield County into New Haven, which is where the major growth is. I told you the good news is it's linear right now, and that allows us to model even more carefully. Right now we have the beds, right now we have the ventilators, and right now we have the PPE to take care of things.
Thanks.
We'll next go to Christine Stewart.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Hey, Christine.
Hi, Christine.
Hi. This question is for Commissioner Cook. First question's for Commissioner Cook. Last we knew, as of Thursday, there were 16 staff members and 8 inmates throughout the state prison system that tested positive. Do we have an update on those numbers?
We do. As of this morning, we have 30 staff and 21 inmates.
Okay. And how are those inmates being quarantined?
So they're being placed into just exactly what you said, quarantine units with just folks that are positive for COVID-19. And we're looking at other ways that we can start to centralize some of that health care so that we make sure that we're taking care of them even better.
And Governor Lamont, will we know when the nursing homes, the COVID positive nursing homes, do we have a list of the names of those homes, and when will those be released?
I think they'll be released as soon as we reach the final agreement with them, which I think is going to be any hour now.
Okay.
Next question will come from Sue Haig with the Associated Press.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Sue.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Governor, how are you? Today, the White House began issuing reports saying what they've delivered to the states, and it specifically references the tri-state region as getting what the 3 states wanted, Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. Is that true, and did they listen to you, or what do you, is it true, and do you think you had some sort of an impact?
Well, I'm really happy that they're talking about the tri-state region, the New York metropolitan area, thinking about the hotspot, not by state, but by region. I'm from the Show Me State, like I said. We've gotten 50 ventilators, for which I'm very thankful. New York's gotten 4,000 ventilators, for which I'm very thankful for them. We're in this together, but we do need more support there.
So we haven't gotten everything that we've wanted, have we? That you've requested?
We'll put it this way, we put in an order for 1,500 ventilators, and we've gotten 50, so we haven't gotten everything we wanted, no.
And I had a quick other question. You were talking about the peaks, and you're saying it's going to be over a month away in New Haven. I guess, how do you explain that? Is it because of the social distancing, it's been flattened out?
No, I just think based upon what we've seen as the virus has come upstate through, starting off in Danbury, heading up to New Haven County, it looks like the peak in Fairfield County, maybe it's coming a little sooner, we'll find out, but it's probably a couple weeks away, and I think we anticipate that New Haven County would be a couple weeks after that.
Okay, thank you.
Next question will be for Paul Hughes of the Rep-Am.
Hi, Governor.
Hey, Paul.
Guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay. Hey, could you explain a little bit more about the plans for reporting discharges or resolved cases from hospitals? Because that's a number other states are reporting, and it's certainly one that people here in Connecticut have been asking about.
Yeah, that is a really good question, and we are going to have that, I'm told, by Wednesday, because it's interesting who's being admitted, but it's just as interesting who's being discharged. And 75% of the people that were admitted in the New York hospital have been discharged. It reminds you that people get better, not just the overwhelming majority of people, especially on the younger side, who maybe have flu-like symptoms and quarantine for 14 days at home, but even those people that end up in the ICU and end up in the hospital, the overwhelming majority of them get better. So we're going to have those numbers for you very soon. I hope Wednesday.
Will that be by county or by hospital, town?
I think we'll certainly have it by county. I'll see if we can get it by hospital. I don't know that.
And as for the death certificates, I'm not quite sure why that number couldn't be compiled, since the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner is issuing the death certificates. Couldn't you just simply have them report that number and start reporting that number as well, as to have the number of confirmed deaths to COVID?
Yeah, hi, Paul. I think the earlier question was based upon how many confirmed deaths are from COVID, in which the Chief Medical Examiner is, of course, is the one who makes that determination. DPH and the Chief Medical Examiner have been working together to make sure that as we get farther in this crisis, the data is more in line. So that particular question that was asked of how many were COVID-related deaths, that's the reason why that question is best for the Chief Medical Examiner based upon their work.
Oh, I understand that. I'm just saying that eventually the Chief Medical Examiner will issue death certificates determining patient A died of COVID, patient B did not. Mm-hmm. And they might be both included in the count by the Department of Public Health. I'm just questioning, why can't you get that confirmed death certificate from the medical examiner's office?
Based upon your question, Paul, that will be happening thoroughly over time. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We'll move on next to WTNH Channel 8, Bob Wilson.
Good afternoon, Governor. I was wondering, maybe this is for Commissioner Cook. You've had a couple of correctional emergency response teams going in. You have correctional officers going in. There's not enough PPE for doctors on the front line. Is there enough PPE?
Bob, can you move the microphone closer? It's very difficult to hear you.
How about now? Is that better?
Yes.
That's better.
All right. So with the lack of PPE in the emergency rooms and hospitals, there's not enough PPE to go around anywhere. How is the prison doing on that, protecting the correction officers, as well as you consider doing a COVID-19 facility? Would you have just one prison for COVID patients?
Right, so I'll try to answer the first question. Yes, it's a challenge for us, and that's why I always try to make sure that when we talk about correctional staff, we're talking about them being first responders, because they are, and they're right in the middle of this. And we have been part of the team, as part of the Unified Command, and so we receive our share of the PPEs, and what we've done is we've distributed them across the state based on population and need. It would be great. I'm sure everyone in all the different hospitals and different places, everyone would love to have their own N95 and have as many as they possibly could. And I wish I could do that for my employees. But instead, we've had to put them in places and then also provide barrier masks. So we've been making barrier masks as part of our enterprise department. So we're producing barrier masks that are not only for the inmate population, which we've given them to, but we've also provided those to our staff. The part that you're talking about, a centralized place, yes, that's in the works right now. We're trying to work through the logistics of that, but that's kind of the direction we're headed as well, so that we can put all of those that are COVID positive in one location, not just one location within a facility. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
And finally, it'll be NBC Connecticut, Jamie Ratliff.
Hi, Governor. What is the message to riders and also to Connecticut Transit bus operators who are concerned that their health is being put at risk?
We're doing everything we can to protect the bus drivers. We're trying to get them the equipment they need, at least a cloth mask. We're trying to wash that down and clean it in antiseptic on a hourly basis. We need them to keep doing their jobs. We need them to keep doing their jobs because otherwise the healthcare workers can't get to work. And that's why they're heroes and first responders as well. By the way, when we have the COVID unit and the non-COVID unit, that does extend the use for our PPE. So you don't have to constantly change it going from one unit to the next. So that's part of what we're trying to do to make sure we can maximize the use of PPE, maximize the use of protective gear, get the desanitizing equipment in the next couple of weeks so we can desanitize this and do everything we can to protect you, be it a bus driver or nurse or somebody serving food in some cases. And that's what we're trying to do every day. So, with that, let me thank you again for the updated news. It's not good news, but it's news that suggests that the social distancing may be beginning to work and that our hospitals are having a chance to at least plan and catch up for where we gotta be. Thank you, everybody.